Assalamu warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Outlier School Parenting Seminar. As most of us are aware of, this is one of our programs for our anniversary celebration, and we're happy to have you here with us. Thank you very much for joining us. While we wait for the others, we'll just wait for 1 more minute until it's 4:35, inshallah. Then we would start. Okay, it's 4:35 already. We'll start now and hope that before we progress too far, the others will join us, inshallah. So today we have quite a number of sessions. We have sessions ranging from academics to the mental health of our children, to special needs and their physical health as well. So inshallah, we'll be starting the first session now by Dr. Olajobi. I would read out his profile. Dr. Abdulfatah Olajobi is an accredited management consultant and the CEO and performance and change management consultant at New Neuros Concept. As a senior partner, he is also the director of learning at Brainy Educare Services. He works with the management of Marital Medical Center, Surulere, as the deputy medical director, having served for almost a decade with the Lagos State Health Service Commission as a senior medical officer. He is a member of faculty at Tekedia Institute, USA, and he facilitates e-learning of mini MBA students for great career success. He's a trained psychotherapist. He studied medicine at the University of Lagos and has diplomas in psychology and change management. He sits on the board of Sidolaf Health Initiative Lagos, Brainy Educare Services, the Outlier School, Crest Care Foundation, and several others. He's the author of the motivational mathematics book, I'm Loving This Math. He has an advanced diploma in health capital management from UNILAG and is the founder and president of Reviving Patriotic Values Initiative, RPVI, a not-for-profit organization that is passionate about youth development and nation building. And today, Dr. Olajobi will be taking us on a session on parental support for academic excellence. So Olajobi, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'll be talking about parental support for academic excellence. And I'll be doing that in the next 15 to 20 minutes. We know that school, first and foremost, what our kids go to do in school is to learn. But their learning is not meant to be just academic learning. We look at their 3 domains of learning. And we are talking about the cognitive, the psychomotive, and also the affective. That is their intelligence, academics, their emotional health, and also their physical health, their movement, fine motor skills, and all that. I'm addressing primarily the academic learning. Students come to school, and as parents, we choose different schools based on our family values and also our expectations for our children. Now, sometimes we also choose schools because of what we believe we missed or what we lacked growing up. Of course, that may not be a good way to go, because we know that what we should seek for our children is what is best for them, not what would have been best for us. However, if there's a need to make your kids achieve some things that you did not achieve as a child, there's a good way to go through that, to go about that. And that is by inspiring them, by also brainwashing them, making them feel they are the ones that made the choices. And so even when we are choosing school, sometimes you want to discuss with them, even though they are small, except for the babies. Now, school teaches. The school founder has his own vision. For example, the Outliers School, we have our own vision as founders. And the main thing behind our passion, our zeal, our drive is the fact that every child should be able to learn. Every child can learn. And every child can not just learn, every child can excel at their learning, whatever the learning is, in literacy, in numeracy, in artwork, in other soft skills too, apart from the academic work. Soft skills, public speaking, leadership, emotional intelligence. Every child can excel in all those areas. It doesn't mean that every child will start excelling as soon as you start teaching them. But every child can get to that extent of excelling if you spend enough time based on that child's individual capability or style. And that is part of things that teachers and the school must help the child to discover. And the parents too will be a partner in this particular area. So as school founders, we have our own vision, even though the ultimate goal is for kids to learn. As parents, you have your own vision. So the first thing we need to understand as parents in trying to help our kids to support them in their academic journey, achieving academic excellence, is that the vision of the school should be closely aligned to our vision as parents. Because I'll tell you, if the vision of the school is not closely, your vision as a parent is not closely aligned to the vision of to the vision of the school, there's likelihood that the learning of the kids can be affected. For example, if we're showing attitude as parents and it affects the way the children see the school, the way the children see the school, or sees the children see their teachers, it's going to affect the way they learn. You know that students learn best when they connect with their teachers. And students are not expected to connect to their teachers. Teachers are expected to connect to their students. So if there is a blemish in the understanding or perspective or attitude of the student that can make the child create a barrier when the teacher is trying to connect, then learning may not take place. And then we'll be wondering, this child is intelligent. That's why you see some students, they excel in literacy, they do poorly at mathematics. Some students they do well in mathematics, they do poorly in literacy. Some will do poorly in both literacy and mathematics, but they'll do very well in music or sports. It's not because there's something wrong with their brains. It's because they are learning selectively. The brain is so superb that there's virtually nothing we want the brain to learn that the brain cannot learn. The only thing is us pushing the brain, giving the brain the opportunity to learn it based on the openness of the mind. So we need to help the kids to be open from this perspective. The next thing is this: as parents, there's no need to create an aura of fear or difficulty in our kids, like making our kids feel mathematics is hard. There's no need, because there's no subject that is hard or easy. The subject that is hard is the subject that we see as being hard and we're not able to give enough attention to. And something that's easy is that subject that we are able to give enough attention to and we love it. The more you do on a particular skill, the more you practice, the better you get. The better you get. And so if we make our children see that every subject is doable, they'll be able to do it. Don't say around them, oh, when I was growing up, my English was very poor too. Don't worry, you catch up. It is okay to say, English was challenging to me too. I caught up later. I'm very sure you catch up. I know you have what it takes because my DNA is in you. I tell my kids, see, there's no need for you not to do well. You don't have any reason not to do well. The only reason you will not do well in your academics is if you're not interested in doing well. Because I did well in my academics. So you don't have any reason because my genes are in you. So we need to reassure our kids that it's possible for them to do it. We have all the reasons and all the responsibilities to believe in them. If you don't believe in yourself enough to push them, to inspire them, to support them, then you may need to look for somebody to help them. But the school is meant to do its own primary job of making sure the kids believe in themselves, do enough work to get better. Some kids don't need to do as much work as others, while some don't need to do so much, even though they need to do, ideally, they need to do more work to get better. But because of the weakness they have, maybe they have learning disabilities, you don't want them to do too much in some area. So a student comes home now and he didn't do well in the last midterm test. They have started the exam. What can you do to help that child? We can do well to help the child by revising with the child. Or for those that are a bit independent, let the child go and read. For those that are much bigger and very responsible, I'll tell them to go and read and set questions for themselves. And they will do it. Or get past questions from an older student for them to do after studying. Or I'll tell them, read, I sit beside them, read, collect the book, ask questions. For those that are very lazy with reading, what you need to do is to support them, be beside them. It may be tough, but I want to tell you that what is really impossible is what you don't think is a priority. I may be like, I'm sounding a bit tough in this particular area, but the truth is our children are a priority. And I'm saying this because we need to rebuild this nation. If all our kids are able to do well academically, they won't have any reason to have low self-esteem, not to believe in themselves, that they will not be able to do anything. Yesterday, we went for the Math Olympiad, the National Math Olympiad. I must tell you, this Olympiad is being organized, it was organized by Mathematical Association of Nigeria. And my students came out because I was the one that went to pick them. The school bus driver dropped them. I went to pick them. And they said, doctor, can you imagine? They were cheating. This country is so bad now because of people, parents, teachers, school owners. We need to rewrite this story. We need to believe in ourselves as parents, that we can support these kids to learn. Our own students didn't feel anyhow like these are things they can't do. They said the questions were easy, but they were cheating. And one of our students had to get up to go and tell the invigilator, somebody is cheating, some people are cheating. Tell them, don't worry, I'll go and call them to order. It's so bad because we are not teaching the children. So what we need to do as parents, create some time, please. We need to repath this country. We need to empower our kids. They can be as good as we want them to be because they all have the potentials. They may not be able to all be excellent now. Some, it may take 1 month when you push them daily, regularly. Some it may take 2 months, some may take a whole term, some may take a whole year. I can tell you categorically of a student that I taught. Came to maths clinic, we did a little, I did 1 month, then some other person taught her. She was very poor in mathematics, and it was just a term that girl needed. I will tell you, it was an exceptional situation because I don't think I've seen kids that improved in that short period, short period. But the truth is, every child has its own time to tip over. It's called a tipping point, but you need to keep putting in the effort. They come back from school, please remind them to read. The first thing to do is not TV. TV, if they must watch TV on a daily basis, it should not be more than 1 hour on a daily basis. If you can skip it, that's what I do for my kids. They don't even, there's no TV in my house even. They can watch on a tab or on laptop. They skip days, weekend, they can watch 2 hours or 3 hours, but they can't watch up to 7 hours in a week. Because research has shown that children that watch more than 7 hours in a week, they are not as smart as children that watch less than 7 hours in a week. So please, this is one major distraction. And please, for those parents that their children are still under the age of 2, please, for God's sake, neuroscience has suggested, due to findings from researchers, that they should not be exposed to screen at all. They should not watch TV. They should not check the laptop, the desktop, the Android phone, iPhone, whatever it is. They should not see screen for 2 years. By chance, it can happen. Maybe you're walking and suddenly the child wakes up. You quickly dodge it. It may be tough. So I'm not just saying theory. At least I have a 4-year-old who we brought up in this age, you know, and it was tough for us. We will not use the phone in the room. We use the phone only in the sitting room. Even that was tough. So we need to work on it. We want to stop having our own children as followers. We want to have our children as leaders. We need to help them, starting from preschoolers. For those that are pregnant now, mothers, please, if you are pregnant now, be reading kids' book on a daily basis. Okay? Excuse me. Be reading books aloud on a daily basis. If you can do some mathematics, it's great. Jewish women, when they are pregnant, what they do is they go and learn mathematics. I don't know if you've heard that before. They will go and learn mathematics to increase the critical thinking skills of themselves and the pregnant and the child in the womb. Because children start learning from pregnancy. Then when your child comes, those toddlers, start reading to them. You can start chanting numbers to them too. There's no problem. Start playing with them. Talk to them as adults. They don't understand. Break it down into simpler language, but don't talk like babies. And what I was trying to tell you is that because you want to mimic a baby, there's no need to mimic babies. That child will be very intelligent if you relate to that child as you're an adult. And other adults relate to that child as adults too. When they come home with assignments, please, assignments are very important. They are very good. Help them with it, support them with it. If you're not available, get somebody to support them with it. But we should create the time. When I was in full-time hospital practice, full-time, I was working at General Hospital, was busy, and I was also working in a private hospital, or I was working with some private hospitals. So in a month, I had the opportunity of sleeping in my own house for less than 2 weeks in a month. 1 week and maybe 3 or 4 days. That was all I had. But every day, I would do assignments with my kids. The ones that were weak amongst them, they improved over time. I never gave up. There's no giving up. It may be tough. Sometimes you may feel like, is this child going to improve? But I bet the child will improve soon. So they have tests. Please revise with them. Not until when test is around. Let us help them on a daily basis. When they come back home, ask them what they learned in school. Let them read what they've done. Some love to read, some don't love to read. Some love to read, but they don't love to read school books. Let's encourage them gradually. They can form the habits. One of the things we can do is also we too should read. Sometimes take their books and read. Sometimes take your own book to read. Books that ordinarily maybe you don't like reading. Some of us don't like reading again. But for the sake of the kids, let's pick up some books to read so they can see us reading. Then for mathematics, if you don't like numbers, don't discourage them. Don't tell them it's okay. You don't have to be excellent. They can be excellent in all subjects. And I'm saying this because growing up, I learned that I could be excellent in all subjects, and I worked out towards that. And I saw other people too who were excellent in all subjects too. Finally, is we can help our kids not to be selective, not to be picky with subjects. Because you can say, oh, I'm very good with science. English and math is not my thing. Don't encourage them. Find a way of encouraging them that they can be good with everything. It starts from when they are babies. For those that still have babies, please work on them. Don't allow them to be picky with food, except it is not healthy for them. Maybe they have allergy and it's dangerous for their health. Please, you can allow them. Apart from that, don't allow them to be picky with food. Encourage them to eat the food. Encourage them. It's a talk for another day. Then for mathematics, every child can excel in mathematics. And I say that all the time. And I've seen kids that were very poor in mathematics develop their skills and also even their love. And that was why I wrote the book, I'm Loving This Math. Every child can excel. A lawyer, if a lawyer will not, a student will not get admission to university because he wants to study law if he doesn't have mathematics, credit in mathematics. So please allow your child to have excellent results in English and mathematics and other subjects too. What you need is that mindset that is possible, and for them to keep working on it. When you make the environment, conducive, when you say it in their presence, that I may not have done well in this subject, but I know you can do it. I know what you need is the support. There are a lot of materials. And for us too, in the school, for those that are our parents, we are not giving up on any child. And we'll continue working on any child, and we'll continue saying it around them, because we know that when you keep saying it, after some time, you believe in it. Lastly, is you say something around somebody, too often the person believes in it, even if it's not true about the person. The person believes in it. So please, the brain that Allah has given us doesn't have the capacity to distinguish between what is real and what is fake. So when you keep saying you can do it, yes, you can do it, you can do it, after some time, that child is going to believe he can do it and start asking questions. And when you help the child, when you push the child, when you help the child, encourage the child will start doing it and will be able to do it. And that is why we do affirmations. Affirmations are very, very good. The brain is powerful. And for academic excellence, our children can do as much as we allow them to do. Please don't limit any child. Allow them to perform wonders. Don't encourage cheating, please. Our children can excel. So far, we allow them to excel. I will stop here because of time. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much for enlightening us and letting us know that aside registering our children in good schools, we can also assist them at home as parents to help them excel in their academics and generally in life. So before we move to the next session, I would like to take any question that we might have for Dr. Olajobi before our next speaker comes in. If you have questions, you can just raise your hand. And then I will call on us one after the other. Okay, I can't see any hand currently. So in case you still have question and the next speaker has started, you can just drop your questions in the comments comments box. Inshallah, we'll look through it. So we'll be moving to our next session now. That is.
Can I just add one more thing since
Okay. All right, sir.
Just very quickly. So the last thing I would just add, since there was no question, is that the brain the brain behaves like muscles behave. Our muscles develop and they grow bigger when we use them. The brain too, in terms of memory or comprehension, they grow bigger when we use them. The brain, the capacity of the brain, the neurons connect. In fact, there's no limit to the length of the brain again. Unlike before, that it used to be believed that the brain doesn't grow again. But now we know there's neuroplasticity, and there's the ability of the brain to keep shaping and reshaping and keep joining and forming connections between the neurons of the brain as even we grow. To the extent that when you have older people, elderly people, they are able to learn new things. We've seen people like that. And also learning, when people keep learning till old age, it reduces their chances of dementia and other challenges of the brain. That's the little I want to add that exercises makes the brain perform better. So if your child's memory is not very good yet, you keep helping the child to keep going over things again and again till he or she improves. And we have had a lot of success stories. You can even check on Jim Quick. For those of us that don't know Jim Quick, he had a damaged brain, but now he's a brain coach himself. Assalamu alaikum. Sophia.
Well, I told you too, the way. I forgot who.
Salam, thank you. Please, yes, walaikum salam, sir. Thank you. Please, let's all make sure our microphones are muted, except when we are called upon to speak. So we'll be moving to the next session now, and that is special needs children and inclusive education. Our lecturer for that would be Mrs. Adebumeyi, Mrs. Doyinsola Jawando Adebumeyi. I would read out our profile quickly. She is a behavior analyst, psychotherapist, self-love and relationships counselor, educational consultant, and certified autism specialist. She helps people, particularly women, discover love and empower themselves to success. She tutors children, she tutors teachers, parents, and other caregivers on how to raise happy and fulfilled children. She also develops programs for and coaches typical and atypical children with various special needs and achieve self-awareness, independence, and self-love. She's passionate about being thankful and finds every reason to be thankful. She's the curator of Thankfulness, through which she motivates others to reach inwards for more. Mrs. Doyinsola Jawando Adebumeyi is the principal consultant at the Coconut Spectrum Educational Consult. She's also co-founder and coordinator at the Learning Place Center for people living with special needs. She enjoys laughing and catching fun. Okay, we look forward to having you with us, ma'am, and laughing with you. So I would pass on to Mrs. Adebumeyi now to take us through our session.
She's unable to unmute. Either make her host or give her the permission.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. Barakallahu feekum, Outlier School. I'm extremely happy for the evolution. Okay, so let's just quickly get into it. This evening, my duty is to sensitize you to what is called special education needs, how it presents, and then what possibilities exist for people who are found to have any type of special needs. Let me quickly say, part of this, I'm going to have my camera off because, as you can see, I'm in a relatively mobile environment. So in order not to distract you, I will take it off most of the time, and then I'll keep on speaking. All right, what is special needs? Special needs, as you can imagine, is anything that anybody, male, female, child, adult, anybody at all, is able to do only with some assistance. That means that for them to need that assistance, that means that they ordinarily would not be able to complete it for one reason or the other. There are many different types of special needs. There's the physical special needs, there's the psychological special needs, there's the neurological special needs, and then there are just those learning disabilities, the different types of special needs. When we talk about the physical, we're talking about visual impairment, hearing impairment, the people who are physically handicapped and they're not able to move from one place to the other like you and I can. So in that case, they will need like a wheelchair to get from one place to the other. In the case of the hearing impaired, they would need the ear, I forget what it's called now, please forgive me. The hearing aid, yes, they're going to need the hearing aid to hear. And people visually impaired, they're going to need like the computerized equipment that help read things to them and help tell them where they are and all of that. In the case of the neurologically impaired people, they are the people that for one reason or the other, there's still a lot of studies going on, but what we find is that they're not able to take in information like you and I. The information is either very delayed or it's everything is jumped up together, so they get so much of it coming to them at any particular point in time. So they find it difficult to sort through things and to do things the way you and I will do it. And in having a special need, that means that they will not do things the way you and I typically would do it. So in my world, where some people refer to them as, they say, oh, this child is normal. So my question is, so that other one that is not doing things like every other one, are you going to say that child is abnormal or that adult is abnormal? You know, and I usually don't get a response. But in my world, what we have is that they are typical when they do things the way every other ordinarily would do it. And then where they do things differently from every other person would do it, then they are referred to as atypical. So we have typical people and we have atypical. So a person who needs external assistance, so to speak, is usually referred to as a person who is atypical in their learning, and so they need to get something to augment it. The same thing with those who are psychologically, who have the psychological impairment, and as a result need certain things like medications or any other thing to help them stay on track. So anything along that line is a special need. Now, but when we say special education needs, that means for those who are able to function in the educational world, learning to cognitive differences, learning to read and write, learning to think in certain ways or think through, learning to do things in sequence and all of that, as long as it has to do with being educated, be acquiring knowledge that would be used in the educational space, and that is called special education. How do we figure out who has a special education need or the other? It's usually they're staring us in the face. But in our environment here, we have a lot of that thing where we say, oh, this child is just naughty, or this child is just lazy, or this child is just this child is just that. We have many things that, many labels rather, that we use. And that is because we are not so familiar with those things. And in the event that we may even begin to see that there's something not quite typical about this particular individual, the many things that we have around us that we also have to contend with tend to sway us from it. And so we just put all the children together and we say, you should be able to learn it, you should be able to learn it. But it's not always that way. When you talk about special education needs, one key thing that affects it is the way the brain is functioning. We know that we have the right brain and we have the left brain, and some of us are a lot more creative and others are very, very analytical. Right. And sorry? Can I go on? Okay. Fatima Olade, no. Okay, I'll go on. And so the way the brain functions also makes a lot of difference. Then there are also sometimes then there are challenges with the synapses, and the way the brain passes information from one to the other is usually stunted. So it can come out in any way. How do we know a person who has a special education need? We know them by one, being in the environment of learning with them. Sometimes they appear not to be paying attention to what is being said. Other times they cannot maintain focus on what is being said. Sometimes it's to their fine motor skills where they're not able to hold on to the writing materials properly. And even where they're able to hold on to the writing materials, sometimes you find that they copy letters from the board in mirror images, or even when they're to write it from on their own. They usually write out in mirror images or they write it upside down. There are also some who have challenges with figuring out distance or figuring out shapes. So in that instance, you'd have a child who you're trying to teach trying to teach the shapes, and every shape that has 4 straight sides and is a closed shape is either a rectangle, a square, a diamond, anyone that the child finds very, very comfortable to be with, because they're not quite able to figure out that even though this has 4 straight sides, 2 sides are longer than the other 2 sides or things like that. They usually don't get it easily like that. Now, when we make those observations, what are the things that we should do? Because everybody is able to learn. I'm a member of a family of special needs people. My immediate younger brother was special needs, and so are 2 of my nephews, and one of my nephew is seriously on the autism spectrum, and the other one is just a little bit. The one who is a little bit, I say he's a little bit because if you met with him today, you wouldn't know. And the reason why his is not so distinct is because by the time he joined our family, we already had 2 behavior analysts in the family. So when we met him, by the time he was just a few months old, we identified that a number of things were not going right. And so we started to put measures into place. And today he has imbibed those measures that we put into place to force him, to jostle him out of the world that he would have ordinarily gone into and shut the doors on people. And the older one, he was kind of like our guinea pig, really, because when he joined us, he appeared to be typical. He was saying mama, blah, 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 blah. And then by the time he was a year old, he actually stopped talking. He stopped making eye contact. He stopped doing a number of things. So we didn't really know what was happening. We're telling ourselves the delusional lies. Oh, he just doesn't want to look at you. Oh, he's just being naughty. Oh, he's just, until we found out. By the time we started discovering that there was something wrong or something not right, he was about 5 years old. So we now had to begin to kind of like break the walls that he had already built around himself to get through to him. Yes, we've made a lot of progress. We have some way to go as well, because he also has a stereotypical behavior. What are the things that help you know when a person has a special need? Aside from the obvious ones that I spoke about, the motor challenges that you can see, either with the gross motor, that's with the larger muscles of the body, which affect the movement of the arms, the legs, the body generally. We also have the fine motor challenges, or the skills that may appear to be challenged, where a child is not able to hold onto materials properly, be it a nylon or a pencil or a book. You find that the grip is usually either too tight, too rigid, or it is too loose, and as a result, things start falling out of their grip. In that instance, there are lots of practices that we put in place to help them. It could be with an exercise ball, a little one, where they continue to squeeze it so that they exercise the muscles in their fingers and in their hands to get it to be more spontaneous, to respond to whatever it is that they're trying to get it to do. Because if you do not exercise it, then it will continue along its line of not being aware or of not paying attention to the need to use those nerves and those muscles at that particular point in time. In the instance where it's a gross motor challenge, where the child is not able to move easily, or where the child is not able to decipher the distance between him and the wall, and as a result he continues to bump into the wall, then we put structures in place to alert him so that he begins to pay attention. He's forced to identify, he's forced to count his footsteps, he's forced to go through the motion over and over and over again to, like, I'm sure that I joined a little bit late, but I'm sure that Dr. Lajabi would have spoken about the developmental, the neural pathways in the brain. That when you introduce a new concept, there's a new pathway that is created. And the more you exercise it, the deeper it gets, more distinct it gets, the more spontaneous it will be to get the response. So it is to put in to identify what the challenges are, to figure out what are the likely causes, and then to now put structures in place to help them bridge the gap. For instance, some of us get to a point where we find that our 10-year-old child does not know how to tell the time. That would have become a special need. Light, a slight one though, but if you were to leave it to continue to go on, then it can become a major one. So what we tend to do as parents and as teachers is say, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't know the time? How can you tell me you don't know the time? How? And we just continue to go round and round and round and round and round in circles, as opposed to what I, as a behavior analyst, and what a trained teacher will do, who will say, you know what, child, come back to the table, sit here. This is 1, this is 2, tell me what this is. We identify 1 to 12, super. Then we identify the face of a clock. We identify hours, we identify minutes, or we introduce concepts of hours and minutes. Then we encourage the child to identify and give us back. Then we also talk about the concept of half hour and o'clock and all of that. So what it is basically is that when you have a person presenting with any type of special needs at all that has come about as a result of they're either not paying attention where that concept was being introduced, which really is what happens to a number of our children who have neurological disorders, because they're in a world of their own as a result of the way their brains function in their earlier years. They tend not to look at other people to see what people are doing. Meanwhile, we as humans, we are objects of behavior and of habit. We look at things, we copy things, we try it, we repeat it. It becomes a habit. We do it often. We have learned how to do it. We do it spontaneously. You and I will get into a car today, and if we have someone that's a favorite person that we're talking to, it's not going to occur to us that we're driving until we get where we're going. Meanwhile, once there was, when we would pay attention to how we would get into the car, check to be sure that we're putting our feet on the appropriate, the accelerator and the brake, and put our hands on the gear and look very, very well to ensure that we have, but because we have done it because we went through it step by step at the beginning, and then we repeated and repeated and repeated it. Now we don't have to think about it before we get it done and before we do it excellently. So in the instance where we have our children or even adults, because it does happen, sometimes there could be some form of seizure or anything at all that causes for some parts of the memory to be wiped off, and we have to learn those things again. It's a very simple thing. It can take a bit of time and it can be a heartbreaker. But once we have gotten over the reality, know that, okay, this person has lost this knowledge, is learning it again. Let us quickly get back to the drawing board and go right back to the beginning. We cannot meet them halfway, because it is better for us to assume that everything about it does not exist and that this is a fresh slate that we're opening, and then we put everything out there and we help them go through it one by one. If there are parts of it that they still have the knowledge of, it doesn't hurt to start from the beginning and go through it. In doing that, we will even further reinforce them and to also build their confidence. You know, because if I want to teach a child multiplication and I start from identifying 1, 2, 3, the child is going to say, oh, I know that. So I'm going to say, oh, wow, you see, you know something already. That's super. You already know this. Wow. So that when we get to the point where the child begins to feel, no, I don't know it, and I really don't want to try because I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want to let myself down. I don't want you to find out that I don't know how to do it. I'm able to say to that child, you know, once there was where you didn't know numbers 1 to 10. But you were the one who now told me 1 to 10, and you didn't even stop at 10. You got all the way to 100. You did that. You know, so the child begins to say, oh, yes, I can do something. I've done something in the past, and I can do it again. And then I now move forward with the child, or adult, as the case may be, patiently. And then the person begins to grasp it. And when they grasp one, we celebrate it. And then we move on to the next one, and we celebrate it, and we move on to the next one. We will not celebrate each one. But at the beginning, in order to build the confidence, we will celebrate each step that we're able to take. And then we'll celebrate every 2 steps. And then we'll celebrate every 3 steps instead of every other step. Then we'll celebrate every 5 and every 10. And it will get to a point where we'll celebrate every 50 and every 100 only. And it will not be so much of a celebration. It will be better. It will be more. well done, good job, you did that, that's super. And that's what we all thrive on, even as typical as we are, as adults and as aware as we are. We know, you and I both know that when someone sees what we have done and they say, oh, wow, well done. Oh, that's really beautiful. Oh, that's a good job. We know how it makes us feel, particularly when our employers and our loved ones say it to us. So those are also the same steps. Those processes that we have gone through, those processes that will walk a baby through, those are the processes that we need to put in place when we're dealing with people with special education needs in whatever area. I've had to adapt this to make it clearer. And when it make it so that I'm able to finish it on time because of the time that I have. And when it comes to the DAOs, people with special needs, my child who is 14 years old and does not know the letters of the alphabet, my child who is 15 years old and is not able to do anything, I have to do everything for them. Are they able to learn? Yes, they are able to learn. As long as we're able to identify where they have learned up to and then put baby steps in place. It needs a number of things, but those things are not far out of our reach. One of them is a knowledgeable person. It can even, most of the time, mothers, we know our children better, even fathers too. We know our children better than any teacher really would know them, particularly at the early stages. It is only when they have been with that particular teacher for an amount of time that the teacher may now know them better than us. But we know our children, but we also have hindrances. We have those things that limit us. And it is the need to go and fend for our own daily needs. You know, we have to go to work, so I can't be with you all the time. And so I feel like my hands are tied and all of that. But if we will just take a little bit of time, because the reality is that 15-year-old who does not know anything, who cannot base themselves today, and you're having to base, if you do not do anything, will evolve into the 30-year-old who cannot base themselves at that time and who you will still have to base. And then you're going to have so much. You're even going to have old age to deal with. Would you rather do it now, or do you want to wait until that time? Because if Allah does not say that that they have reached the end of his provisions for them on earth, they will continue to be. They will continue to be. So we may as well just cut our losses wherever we are today, whatever age it is that our children are at, where they're experiencing these challenges, and go back as far back as we have to and take the steps that we have to take with them, for them, and beside them. And some of the ways you can do it is to sensitize people around us. If the people around us choose not to join us, Alhamdulillah, we're Muslims. Allah will suffice for us. Let us begin to take the steps, and we will meet other people along the way who will join us and who will uplift us and also equip us and help us get our children to where they need to be. In my family today, like I said, the younger of my nephews who was presenting with autism, if you met him today, you will not be able to tell, but there's some telltale signs. And the telltale signs are that when he talks, his conversation is disjointed. He's not going to have a back and forth conversation with you unless you make it. He would ordinarily, if you ask him a question, he will answer you briefly and then immediately go back to what you want to say. At every point, he will answer you just brief enough and quickly go back to what it is that he wants to say. So that at the end of the day, you find you're having 3 or 4 conversations side by side with this same one person, simply because that's what he wants to talk about. And he also has some other things. And there's also a beautiful thing. You know, Allah has a way of doing things. There's always a compensation for us. And that is, if we would look for the compensation, we'd find it. Because that nephew of mine, he's under 10 years old. He has quite a lot of skills. They may have some shortfalls in some areas, but in other areas, they are what they call, they usually have what is called the savant skills. The savant skills is spelled S-A-V-A-N-T. It's like some special skills heightened. You know, they say that, I think it was the Sound of Music that I heard this, that where the Lord closes the door, and where God closes the door, somewhere he opens the window. And in the parlance that where one of our Dr. Olajabi, help me here. where one of our abilities, where we lose one of our abilities, for instance, people who are visually impaired, they may be visually impaired, but their hearing is usually more heightened, or their smell is usually more heightened, so that you find that they're able to do some things in some other areas much better than any other person would. And we have that with my nephew. The younger one he's a photographer. He's also becoming a scientist, because when I went to their home a short while back, I saw a lamp that he created, and then they did that at school. And from that, he has also gone and created a lot more electrical things. And his father does not know where he got it from. Even the school says, where did he learn that from? But he's doing that on his own because he's been exposed to certain things. So we tend to have that with them. For the older one who still has quite a bit of inappropriate behavior, we call them, what do you call them now? Our maladaptive behavior. He also has a lot of strength. He has an affinity for music. So he plays the piano. Presently, he has a musical band of his own. He plays the keyboard, and he has a guitarist and a drummer to support him. And they have a musical band that plays at events. You know, so we have that with him. He's a great swimmer. He's also a wonderful gymnast. Because he was born in the States, every year his family goes to the States for holidays and everything, and he also gets to do something. But now, part of why he goes to the States every summer is because there's a recreational center somewhere around their home in Maryland that has kind of like requested for him to come in every summer whenever he's able to. And what happens there is they have like a trampoline set. It's kind of like upbeat here in Nigeria. And when he gets on it, he does a lot of moves. He jumps, he twists himself, he jumps his somersaults and always lands on his feet or on his back and immediately jumps off. He has many, many ways of doing it. And they actually have him there because they noticed that whenever he came around and he was jumping, it had a way of attracting a lot more people. So what they now do is around the time when he's going to be in the States, they put it out there that he's going to be around, and people come and they also bring their children. And he now serves as motivation to the other gymnasts, the younger ones, on, okay, that's another style to try out, that's another style to try out and everything. So they have their things that they do. He's also, I don't know if I said he's also an excellent swimmer. So all of these things are things that they do. Some of them draw very, very well. Some of them sing very, very well. Some of them write so well. I have a student he's not quite in my class, he's in a lower class to mine. And that child, when he writes, it is amazing. We attended a writing workshop for children for the World Book Day, and they put the students in four in a group. And because he's who he is, he wasn't going to work with anybody. So on his own, this child is about 7 years old. He sat on his own, and while it took 4 children 12 minutes to come up with a story and make it into a book right there and then, he sat down on his own. He came up with his story. He wrote it. He made his illustrations. His illustrations were not very, very clear, but hey, he's 7 years old and it is his book, you know, and he could explain everything that was in it. So we need to begin to look beyond the label. The label is there just to help the teacher understand that you should go easier on this child, and perhaps to also help remind us as parents to go easier on them. It doesn't talk about what they are not able to do or talk about any limitations for them. They can learn every single thing that is supposedly a need to them, that brings about a need to them today. As long as we are able to be creative enough to find ways to capture their attention and to find opportunities for them to practice whatever it is that they're doing over and over and over and over again, until, like for you and I with driving and cooking and doing many other things, it becomes a habit that we now do spontaneously. And because we do it often, we do it spontaneously, we will only get better at it. So I urge you parents, it's not an easy thing to find out anywhere in the world that you have a child with special needs. And it is even much more harder in a place like Nigeria to find it, because everything is expensive enough as it is. Not to talk of when you have to deal with a child who has special needs. It can mean, one, taking away time that you could have used to other things for yourself. Two, employing teachers to come and do some extra hours, paying for many, many other things, buying many other things. You know, I understand. But you see, wallahi, children are a blessing to us parents. And if we see them as a blessing, and we also do tawakkul, knowing that it is Allah that has given them to us, and He has given them to us because He knows that if we will try, then we can make a success of them, and as a result, make a success of ourselves as well. And we now begin to tune into that. We will get to a point where our children will just find out that this child who never knew how to do these things is doing it so well, and is even showing others an easier way to do it. So I urge you to please just take the time and make the effort and put in a little bit more. A little bit will always go a long way. And another thing is, part of what I want to also point out is that if they have siblings, younger or older siblings, we as therapists and as professionals, we usually work with their siblings to help us guide them and show them, because a number of times they tend to learn better from people who are closer to them in age than they would learn from adults. So if I know how to do it, and I show their siblings, and I help their siblings understand that, you know, in this area, Mohammed is different, and so we're going to need you to put in a little bit more attention, or to tell him to make sure that he walks through the process. They will do it for us. They will do it for their brother. They will feel like, hey, I'm also responsible. They're seeing here that I can do some things. You know, we empower them to empower the child, to empower us, to empower every other person. So please, 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 and please, it might not be easy for you to identify what exactly the needs may be. You may just see what is the challenge with them. Speak with educators, speak with therapists, speak with behavior analysts who will take the time to observe them, to figure out what it is, and then to develop programs for them. A number of times I have developed programs for parents, and what I do after developing the program, that's after observing the child or the client, that is, once I develop the program, I walk the parents through it. I tell them the reasons why each step has been put in place, what we're trying to achieve, and all of that. And they are the ones. It's usually the home and the schools who carry it out, because if I say I'm going to develop a program and carry it out for you, I'm sure Mr. Olajobi knows that I'm telling you a big lie, and there's no need to lie. Mr. Olajobi, right? So I would rather just tell you how to do it, tell you what I see, give you, talk to you about the tools and equipment we need. We come up with it together, and then you find out that, hey, before you know what's happening, you have become a therapist yourself, and you will do a much better job. Because if I were to come and work with your child, at the most, I will work with your child for 6 hours in a day. There's still well over 10 hours that your child is most likely going to be awake. What happens then? But how about I show you how to do it, and then I leave you, and then you teach the younger or the older siblings, you teach the aunties and uncles, you teach the driver that's going to be in the car with him, you teach grandma, you teach everybody, so that at every point in time, your child is getting intervention. The more the hours of intervention your child gets, the likelier they're going to come out of it faster. You remember the 10,000 hour rule. So that is what, those are some of the ways to do it. And now that you know that it is doable, now that you know that it doesn't mean you have to go and break into banks and everything, please, I urge you to work with us, to work with the school, so that your child can be the best of whatever it is that Allah has put them on earth for. We don't know what it is. If we knew, we'd just go straight there. But we do not know. But we need to encourage them to take steps, observe them, and to get feedback from them, to ask them certain questions, and then we know what it is that we're leading them onto. I've seen Mr. Olajobi here, so I believe she wants to ask me to just be done. Okay, thank you, Dr. Olajobi, for telling me Jazakallah khairan. I have read that very, very well, and thank you so much, friends. You're doing a great job. It can't be easy being parents of outliers. I don't know how you will do it, but I'm so happy that my children did not meet outliers. My children have already gone through there. and that we don't stay in Sule. I think it would have been a bit much, because I'm sure that what they're doing in that environment is not beans and my. Thank you so much, Dr. and Dr. Mrs. Olajobi, and thank you extraordinarily to parents, and of course, teachers. I trust my heart to you. You people are the ones doing everything, and may Allah continue to bless us. May He continue to add to us, and may He bring lots of fruition to our efforts. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullahu khairan. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the session. We really appreciate your efforts, ma'am. Thank you very much. So if we have any question for our speaker, please type it in the comment section. Inshallah, we'll read it out and she would answer the questions. We'll be moving now to the next session, and that is raising children with desirable behaviors. That would be taken by Mrs. Olajobi. I would read out our profile now. Mrs. Eniola Shakir Olajobi, the founding president of the Association of Nigerian Educational Psychologists, has been working as a practicing educational and child psychologist for well over a decade. She is also the CEO of Brainy Educare Services and the director of the Outlier School. She has been working with major stakeholders in education, teachers, education policy makers, parents, and students to unleash their enormous potentials and direct them towards nation building. She has been at the forefront of staging unique programs targeted at motivating people for lifelong learning. She has given several presentations and lectures, as well as hands-on workshops on emotional health, emotional wellness, emotional hygiene, and emotional first aid. She has recently published a series of emotional wellness kits for children and teens, the first of its kind. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Olajobi for our session. Mrs. over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Dear parents, good evening, everyone. It's good to be here. Yes, I have indeed learned a lot listening to the first and second session. And I'll be taking the third session. We have one more session to go before we end it for today, inshallah. I'm going to be talking, like our moderator said, about raising children with desirable behavior. I'm sure that every one of us, we all want well-behaved children, but a lot of times we're wondering, why don't they listen? I'm tired and all of this and all of that. So what exactly do we need to know? Because we have very little time, I'm not going to be able to go deep into how behaviors are formed and learned and all of that, but I'm going to be giving us some key points. The first is that raising children is a continuous cycle. It's not a one-off process. It's continuous, and it's just like we have a land and we want to plant. There's going to be one thing or the other we're doing at every point in time. Are we trying to plow? Are we trying to wet? Are we trying to now plant? Are we harvesting? Are we weeding? Are we doing what? Or are we preparing for the next? So all year round, there's something happening on that plot of land for us to really ensure that we nurture that land well. The same thing it is for children. It is a continuous process. A lot of times we get overwhelmed with the fact that it's continuous, but really it is. So when a child is born, you might be bothering with teething problems, colic and all that. And you're like, oh, I can't wait for them to get over this. But when they get over it, you're having other things to bother about. So when they start to crawl around the house, you're rearranging, you're constantly packing. And then like, oh, I can't wait for them to start walking and, start following instruction. But you just realize that from one stage to the other, like new sets of development coming with their own peculiar challenges. And then the teenage years come and you're like, oh my God, I thought I had seen enough. And now the teenage years are even tougher than any other thing I'd experienced. And even after the teenage years, they get into adulthood, you have different sets of challenges and, because there's a different development. So the first key takeaway for today is that raising children is lifelong. There are no off days, there are no weekends, there are no what else? So that's the first thing we need to have at the back of our mind. This will help us to deal better with the overwhelm that comes from what the challenges of parenting from time to time. The second thing, we now zoom down on the topic, which is behavior. How do we get our children to become well-behaved? Learning begins for children even before they're born. That's the second thing. Learning begins for children even before they're born. So research has shown us that children, when they already hear regularly, they're used to certain sounds that they hear, whether the sound of the ceiling fan, whether the sound of the washing machine or blender, whether your voice or the dad's voice. You know, all of these things means that children can learn while they're in their mother's tummy. And researchers are saying that it's good that we make good use of this, because even mood can and will usually affect the vulnerability of a child's personality. Let me explain that. So when a mother is maybe particularly stressed out or emotional during pregnancy, chances are that, so she's crying a lot, she's doing a lot of, all of those things. Every time we're sad or we're crying or we're emotional, there's certain hormones that are released. And remember that the baby is in that same body, of that same woman. So chances are that this child will also have a very fragile emotions, or should I say will be an emotional child. So this means that learning does begin before the child is born. And this means that we want to take care, and we need to realize that children come with different peculiarities. Now, having said that, what is that very important thing that we need to know about behavior? Behavior is learned. And that's why I talked about the fact that learning begins before we're born. So first of all, we've said that raising children is a continuous cycle. Secondly, we've said that learning begins even before a child is born. And now thirdly, behavior is learned. Behavior is learned. There isn't something that, there's what some psychologists will say that children are like a plain slate, a white plain slate, like the tabula rasa, and everything that they do is from what they've learned around them. So when a child is born, it's not like this child is going to be well behaved or this child is going to be naughty. It is what they learn around them. And this learning begins before they're born. So it becomes very important for us to ask ourselves, what are our children learning, or how can we influence what they're learning? Because you see, even though we've said behavior is learned, the honest truth is behavior is least learned as a verbal instruction. A lot of times we believe that behavior is something that we can just tell children, Abdullah, don't tell lies, okay? It's not good to tell lies. That's not how behavior is learned. Yes, there's a slim chance they can learn behavior that way, but most times children don't learn behavior through verbal instruction. They learn more from modeling. They learn more from modeling. They look at us and they do what we do. So a lot of times when we're giving instructions to our children, we need to get a bit mindful about our own behavior, the things that we do. Sometimes we're complaining that our children don't listen, that we're calling them like 6, 7 times before they respond. But we need to ask ourselves, how often do they have to call you before you respond? Because a lot of times, as parents, we're on our phones and they're saying, mommy, mommy, and you do not even know that your child is saying mommy or daddy because you're busy on the phone. By the time you hear it, or sometimes the child is frustrated and say, I'm even calling you, and the child is going away in annoyance. And they say, oh, sorry, what were you saying? So there's no use saying that child doesn't answer to their name when they're called. It's better for you to look inwards and see that that child has learned that behavior from you because you're modeling it. So yes, verbal instructions can work, but it's the least effective when it comes to learning behavior. That is number 3. Number 4, children are human. Children have always been human since the day that they were born, even though they can't talk yet, they can't tell you things, they can't sit, but they are human. They have a brain and they can do all of the complex things that humans can do, only that it comes one at a time. Why am I saying this? A lot of times we expect our children to behave well, but we don't realize that they're seeing things. You're telling a child not to tell lies, but you are home, you're picking a call and you're saying, I'm on my way to, or I'm in the office or something. Your child is there. That child has learned that it's okay to be in place A and say you're in place B. So children are human. They learn from us. They learn from their environments. They're very good copycats. They're like a sponge and they soak up everything that they see being done in the environment, the behavior that the adults are exhibiting. Sometimes the influence may not even come from us. It may come from the maybe other people that live in the house. So we need to be careful. Sometimes we're very sure that, oh, we're not the ones modeling the wrong behavior. But what about the other people that live at home? Maybe we have extended family living with us. Are we sure of what kind of behavior they're modeling? Maybe we have a house help or a housekeeper that lives in. Are we sure the kind of behavior that they're modeling? Because children are human and they will learn from the environment. Now, still on children being human, this also means that we should treat children like humans. Sometimes you just see some people talking at children instead of talking to or talking with. So you want to give instructions to a child. First of all, how are you even sure that this child knows that it's wrong? We should always set rules. We're going to come to that in a bit, but we have to realize that because they're human, we should treat them as such. A lot of times, what I see is that we have a tone with which we talk to adults and a different tone with which we talk to children. And this shouldn't be so. A child is human. We need to talk to a child the right way. So tell your child, can you please help me get my bag from the room? Because that is your child doesn't mean you shouldn't use please. Because you just say, oh, it's my child, I'm your mother. Get my bag from the room. This child is going to get the bag, but the child has also learned to talk rudely. And then you go out and you're wondering, why is the child so rude? A child who is in an environment where everyone is polite and using please and thank you is very, very unlikely to use rude terminologies when referring to other people. So let's talk to children the way we talk to other humans, because children are human. And then the last key point, but I'm going to say some other things, but the last key point is that learning requires reinforcement. Learning requires reinforcement. It is not possible, we have not been wired that way, to hear something for the first time and retain it 100%. Except, of course, the magical moment, which a lot of professors of years of experience are still trying to discover what triggers the magical moment. But the honest truth is, if I tell you something now that you haven't heard before, if I teach you something, maybe I want to tell you the longest name that I know. And I tell you the longest name I know is Joseph Desire Mebutu Sesese Kuku Ngbedu was a banger. And I want you to give it back to me immediately. It's almost going to be impossible because it hasn't been reinforced. You haven't learned it before and you've heard it just once. So please don't wonder that I thought I told you not to go there. For children, you need to reinforce, you need to talk about it again, you need to explain it. And that's the final point, which will take me to setting rules. Let's set rules. Let there be very realistic expectations, because children are children. Children will be children. You cannot expect a child who is 2 or 3 years old to sit down and be calm in one position for 2 hours. Their attention span is very short. So we have to make our expectations realistic. We have to help these children to succeed. So get them busy. They have a lot of energy. Biologically, they have a lot of energy. We have to use the energy positively. Otherwise, they'll misbehave. Stop jumping. Don't do this. Sit down there. Can't you just sit? If you have a 3-year-old who just sits, there's trouble. You're going to be worried. you're going to feel, I hope there's nothing wrong with this child. So let's not confuse our children by communicating unrealistic expectations. Let's be very realistic. Let's remember that children will learn better from what we do rather than what we tell them to do or not to do. And then we grow through this. We keep reinforcing it. You've given a rule, you've told the child this is the way to behave. When the child misbehaves, talk about it again. Remember what I said? This is what I want you to do. This is what I want you not to do. You remember that we talked about it. And then the third time you can say, okay, so you see, the next time you do this, there will be a consequence. This will be the consequence. And please, please, and please, I beg you parents at this point, you have to ensure that the consequence is another realistic thing. Sometimes we just say things like, I'm not going to give you food, but you know you can't do that. And you don't want to have a power tussle with your child. Power tussle will bring about more and more undesirable behavior. So just tell that child, this is a consequence. Make sure it's a consequence that is very realistic, and you have to be consistent with that consequence. When that child exceeds the limit that you've set, please ensure that you carry out the consequence as you already said. Otherwise, it becomes a threat. And once your child knows that you're very good at threatening, they just say, oh, that's how my mommy does, or that's how my daddy does. And then they keep doing the wrong thing because they know you will just shout and keep quiet about it. So we have to model good behavior. Let's remember to drop our phones more often so we can interact with our children naturally. The phone is killing a lot of fluid interaction between parents and children, and it's causing more and more challenging behavior than children, because a lot of times they're talking to us. Half the time we cannot hear them for real. We're just nodding and shaking our head, and they know we're not there. So we're absent-minded. And even though those children are not using phones yet, they've already learned those behavior. So let's drop our phone more. Let's see behavior as a building block, meaning that we have to keep building it. We shouldn't say, but I thought I told you yesterday. You said it yesterday, please say it again today. That's the way behavior is learned. They need reinforcement. They need you to keep telling them, and they're going to grow through it and explain the reason why. You can't afford to allow anger to block you from explaining to your child why they need to do so and so. There's some non-negotiable rules, keep them as that. There are some that you can afford to negotiate. I always say this, choose your battles and win them. You can't win all the battles. So have very few rules that are realistic to help your child behave properly. So if there are any questions as to particular problems with behavior with children, inshallah, I would answer that. Otherwise, I would say that I'm done. Let me just do a quick recap. The first one is that raising children is lifelong. The second one is that learning begins even before birth. The third one is that behavior is learned and is least learned by verbal instruction. The fourth one is that children are human. And the final one is that learning requires reinforcement. And so we have to do it again and again, rather than just once and expecting us to see something significantly different. Okay, so that's it from me to you. Thank you for listening. I hand over back to our moderator at this point. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Mrs. Olajobi, for the session. Jazakumullahu khairan. I would like to reiterate that if you have any questions, please drop it in the comment section. I saw a question for Mrs. Adebumei, but we'll take it, inshallah, after our last session. So we'll be moving on to our last but not the least session for today, and that would be eye health for our children. That would be taken by Dr. Alima Alimi. She is a consultant ophthalmologist and child eye care expert. She's the CEO of An-Nur Eye Center, Surulere, and founder of Restore Eye Care Foundation, where she screens, facilitates, and trains teachers and parents on best eye care practices. She has over 30 years of medical practice and over 19 years as a consultant ophthalmologist. She is one of the only 5 in the whole of Lagos State that has a subspecialty training in pediatric ophthalmology and strabismus, okay, squints. In the last 3 months, she has successfully trained and provided free kits for 450 teachers in Lagos State in the basic detection of visual impairment in the classroom. She's an advocate of child eye health through breast practices and has a blog where she shares her knowledge with the public. The blog URL will be put in the comment section, inshallah, for those of us that would like to check it out. So I would like to pass on the microphone to Mrs. Alimi, Dr. Alimi now.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on this auspicious occasion of the 10th anniversary of the Outlier School. My name is Dr. Halima Alimi. I'm a pediatric ophthalmologist, and this evening I'll be talking to you about glaucoma in children. Now, glaucoma is a disease condition in which the nerve that subserves our sight is gradually and progressively damaged by having abnormally high pressure within the eyes. And so when there's high pressure within the eye, it doesn't allow our nerve to get proper blood circulation, and our nerve depends solely on its blood circulation, on its blood supply for its nutrition. And so when you have high pressure within our eyes, damming back the blood flow of the nerve is starving and gradually getting destroyed. And as it gets destroyed, the person's vision begins to reduce. Now, glaucoma is the leading cause of irreversible blindness in the world. And so you can categorize blindness as being reversible or irreversible. Many people have heard about cataracts. Cataract is the commonest cause of reversible blindness. And so if a person is densely blind from cataract, and that's the only reason the person is blind, and you undertake a cataract surgery, the very next day the person can see. No, not the case with glaucoma. Where it comes to irreversibility, permanent blindness, glaucoma is definitely the leading cause, both in adults and in children. And so we should look at the statistics of childhood glaucoma. Compared to adult glaucomas, childhood glaucomas are not as common, but the impact is huge because they're young. Sometimes children are born with glaucoma, as we will see later in this presentation. And so the impact, it's a lifelong impact. They have the whole life, so many years ahead of them. And so this is why childhood glaucoma is important, even in the number of children it affects. Studies have shown that in the Western Europe, that approximately 1 in 10 to 30,000 live births, approximately one child, that's the incidence of glaucoma, congenital glaucoma, that is in children born with glaucoma. In countries like Saudi Arabia, it's much more frequent than that. They have about the highest incidence of congenital glaucoma, and we will talk in a moment about why that's the case. So whereas in Western Europe, for instance, 1 in every 10 to 30,000 babies born, in Saudi Arabia is 1 in every 2,500. And in Saudi Arabia, glaucoma is mostly responsible for the over 8,000 children who have low vision. Now, in studies done for blindness, causes of blindness amongst children, in Great Britain, about 1.2% of blindness in children is from glaucoma. In northern India, 3%, southern India, as much as 7%. Now, what's the mechanism? It's important for us to understand. I mentioned it already, but let me just reiterate that as you can see on the left side of your screen, you see a picture of the eye. This is a section of the eye in like a lateral section. If you look from the side and you slice the eye open and you take a look from the side, this is what you would see. And so the structure in front is what we all appreciate looking black in front of our eyes. And the structure at the back, which we cannot see, is the nerve. This is like a stalk of a flower. So this attaches the eyeball to the brain and takes visual messages. It's like a cable. It's like an electrical cable, taking visual messages back and forth. And so on the picture on the right, you can see how pressure, puts a sort of backward direction on the eye. And so pressure is, when it's excessive, it's exerting pressure on the back of the eye, on the blood supply, impeding, blocking, reducing the blood supply of the nerve. And so when that happens, like I said earlier, it is starved and it's unable to function. So this is what glaucoma is. That for some reason, the pressure is high. And in this case, in the case of children, it would be because there's the filtration for most of them, the area in the eye that should filter fluid out of the eye isn't working properly. And so there's a net excess of fluid left behind. And this is what is majorly responsible for this pressure. Now, when a person has glaucoma, when we as clinicians, when we look in the eye, this is what we see. So the picture on the left side of your screen is a normal nerve. So this is a nerve, this roundish area that's attached to the back of the eye, and these are the blood vessels that come in from the back to supply beautifully. The picture on the right, you can see clearly that pale area in the center. That is where pressure, this is an eye with glaucoma, this is where pressure, excessive pressure in the eye has eaten into that nerve and also disrupting its blood supply. And this is exactly what we see when we examine your eye as ophthalmologists. Now, what are the types of glaucoma that you can find in childhood? Glaucoma can be categorized as being primary, in which case it just happens. There's basically, like I said, a defective development of the sieve in the eye that's supposed to drain fluid. And so the eye, some part of the eye has fluid circulating to nourish it, whereas the nerve has a blood supply. The structures in the front part of the eye, the anterior part of the eye, are nourished by some fluid, which brings all the nutrients. So this fluid has an entry point and it has an exit point. And so what happens is that the exit point is now defective. That's what happens in glaucoma. And that's why there's a lot of pressure, because the fluid coming in is unable to filter out at the rate at which it's coming in. So there's a net excess. So childhood glaucoma can be primary, in which case there's a defective development, and this is usually genetic. It's usually genetic, it's an inherited tendency. Or it can be secondary. Secondary means there's an event that has happened that has led to glaucoma. And so if a person has an injury, if a child's eye is injured, sometimes certain events following injury can end up causing glaucoma in an eye. Or if a child has had surgery, so it is not unusual to see children who have had cataract surgery developing high pressure in the eye. Of course, this can be countered with treatment, but we're saying this sometimes happens after surgery. Then drugs. There are certain medications that if they're abused or misused or overused, they can actually cause high pressure in the eye. Top on the list, steroids. Whether it's steroids taken by mouth or steroids taken, by eye drops. And so if steroids are overused, this can cause, glaucoma. And then inflammation. So when you have a red eye, the commonest causes of red eye would be conjunctivitis, so either viral or allergic or bacteria, but that's on the surface of the eye. Sometimes the cause of the redness is inflammation for much deeper within the eye. And when this happens and it's not properly treated, events following inflammation can actually lead to glaucoma. And so these are secondary causes of glaucoma. So in this case, something is known to cause the glaucoma, and this is what an event, that's why they're called secondary. Now, the question to ask is, what ages can be affected in children? Every stage, really from every stage of childhood, right from a newborn. And so you can have a baby who started to have high eye pressure even in the uterus, in the womb, before being born. And so the day they're born, they already have glaucoma. And so this is called congenital glaucoma. It can be seen in a brand newborn baby, or a few months after, maybe a couple of months after, it can become obvious. Infantile glaucoma it happens during infancy, as the name suggests, and it can extend all the way to up to 3 years of age. Then there's juvenile glaucoma. This happens in a child who's older than 3 years, but sometime before adulthood. And so basically at any stage in a child's life, a child can have glaucoma. Now, what are the symptoms? It's important for us to realize that the symptoms of glaucoma will depend on the age of the child when this glaucoma started. And so when you have a child who's very young, from newborn age up to about age of 3 years, the coat of the eye, the eyeball is soft. The coats are still very soft. And so there's a tendency for this high pressure to balloon the eye, and so the eye looks large in size. So this is called ophthalmos. That's called bullseye. It's a medical term. Ophthalmos means bull's eyes. And so when you look at such a child, and we will see a few pictures in a short while, you'll see it just strikes you that the eye looks larger than it should for that age. And so that's because there's high pressure in it. It's like having too much air in a balloon. And so high pressure in a child less than 3 years old, because the coats of the eye are still soft, it will balloon out and look really large. And also, what we see from outward, from outside, as the black part of the eye will look hazy. It's not really black. It looks hazy, sometimes looking whitish. That's because there's a lot of this water that is left excess in the eye is now pushing and logging into, water logging that black part of the eye, making it look hazy. And then the eyes water. So children with congenital glaucoma, you find out that the eyes are wet all the time. They're watering, almost like they're crying all the time. And then they're very sensitive to lights. So they're always shutting their eyes when the lights are on, and so these are the major 4 features in an eye in a child less than 3 years old. The eyes are large, they're hazy, they're watery, and then they're very sensitive to light. However, over the age of 3 years, if a child develops high pressure over the age of 3 years, the eyes don't balloon out because right now the tissues are firmer, they're more mature, so they're not as soft. And so that ballooning effect doesn't really happen. And so in this case, it basically remains silent until it has affected the vision to a certain extent. And when this happens, what you would see are features that suggest that the child has impaired, sight, such as blurring. And so a child may not be seeing the board properly. A child may be wise enough to verbalize and say, things are looking blurry. Or it may just be noticed that the child is very slow in executing tasks, slow in copying, slow in reading, slow with homework. So an examination may actually reveal that this child has a glaucoma. Sometimes we see other features that suggest low vision, like wobbly eyes. We call that nystagmus. So sometimes you can look at a child and you see that the eyes are sort of wobbly, undulating, either side to side or up to down. That is nystagmus, and it might be an indicator of low vision. And one of the causes of low vision in childhood could be glaucoma. Also squint, especially if you have the glaucoma in one eye. Sometimes glaucoma can be in one eye and not the other, and so the weaker eye tends to fall out of alignment. Squint means one eye is looking straight and the other eye is looking in another direction. It's not in alignment with the other eye, and this would happen when a child has a squint in one eye. So these are some of the symptoms, because the symptoms of childhood glaucoma will depend on the age at which the child has glaucoma. Ballooning out of the eye, looking hazy, watery, and sensitive to light when the child is less than 3, but otherwise just other features of impaired vision when the child is over the age of 3. Now, a picture speaks more than 1,000 words. So let's sort of look at what we're talking about. So this slide shows a comparison between a normal eye in a baby on the left and then a glaucomatous eye on the right. So straight away you can see the difference. So when you look at the child on the right, it strikes you that there's a disproportionate distribution of the black to the white part of the eye. And so you see the black is so large and has occupied so much space, you can barely see the white part of the eye now. So this is what we call buphthalamus, bullseye. And in this case, it's in both eyes. It's not always the case. Now, if you see this picture on the left, obviously you see the eye on the left is, the child's left eye is normal compared with the right. So you see clearly that's a bull's eye, and you see the haziness that I'm talking about. The picture on the right unfortunately involves both eyes, and you see both eyes are ballooned and looking hazy. Such eyes are also watery, and the child will tend to run away from light. What's the effect that glaucoma has on the vision? Like I said, it destroys the vision, and it continues to eat away at how wide out the person can see. And so it starts to eat away at your field of vision. So this is an illustration of what happens. So the picture on the far left is a view of a person who has early glaucoma. And so if the person is looking at a butterfly perched on a flower, if you look on the outer parts, you will see that there's this darkness, little patches of darkness in the outer part of the vision. This is a very early glaucoma. And eventually it progresses. You can see how progressively the field is being eaten up and being blackened out. And so it ends up with a tunnel vision. And at this stage, the person is really looking at blindness because they can't really navigate when you cannot see wide out. And so this is how vision loss progresses when a person has glaucoma. Now, what's treatment for glaucoma? So yes, it is very, very treatable. So if a child has glaucoma, the treatment is mainly surgical. So with surgery, to create an extra drainage area for this fluid which drainage is defective, you relieve pressure in the eye, and there's a very rapid response, improvement in such cases, especially when there are early findings, when they are attended to very early. There's also a place for medical treatment with eye drops. And so sometimes this is like a temporary measure before the surgery. Sometimes you can still add it on even after surgery. And so yes, it is treatable. The next slide will illustrate for us what we have to gain from treatment. And so the picture, this is a child, the same child at different stages in the treatment. So this is the upper left picture is the before treatment. So you see that it involves one eye because that eye looks so hazy. You can see that compared to the other eye. So now after treatment, the picture on the top right, you can see that the eye is so much better, but you can still look and see that there's still a little bit of haze. In the bottom left picture, you see the haze is almost totally clear, and then this is a close-up picture of the same child. The arrow shows just a little things that are left over, but you see that this is a much clearer eye now. And so there's much to be gained by doing surgery, but a child needs early attention and immediate surgery. Early diagnosis by taking to see an ophthalmologist as soon as anything is of such is noticed, and then early treatment. And so delay with treatment, taking a long time to come to a decision to give consent to have your child treated, may be working against the progress of the child. Let's talk about prevention. And so is there in any sense how glaucoma can be prevented? Well, yes. Now, I did mention that the glaucoma can be primary, and that's, as a matter of fact, the commonest type of glaucoma. So primary glaucomas are usually genetic, and the way in which it's inherited most of the time is what you call autosomal recessive. That means that either parent has a trait, but it will not manifest if the two don't come together. And so if you have a parent with a trait who has a child with a parent, a spouse who has no trait at all, it would manifest. But if you have both traits coming together, it can manifest. Therefore, we see primary congenital glaucomas are much more common in societies where you have consanguinity, which means marriages within the family, like cousin marriages or other relatives, first-degree relatives or other relatives within the same family. And so if this family has a recessive glaucoma gene, then when two family members come together, chances that they will have a child with glaucoma, very high. Now, so if you avoid consanguinity, then automatically you'll be vastly reducing the numbers of primary congenital glaucomas that happen. But we've already said that glaucoma is not, and let me just mention that that's why there's such a high prevalence in the Middle East, in countries like Saudi Arabia and other countries in the Middle East, also in Asian countries where people sometimes tend to keep marriages within the family. You find a lot of this. And so to avoid consanguinity, in some of these countries, what they're doing is genetic testing for people who intend to get married. And so if they find the gene that, because it has been identified, if they find some of the genes that are associated with glaucoma in the two people, they counsel them and try to discourage them. So, but then other causes of glaucoma are secondary. And so if we can avoid the events that would lead to a glaucoma, like an eye injury, you can hope to prevent glaucoma. So if a child avoids eye injury from anything, sharp objects, objects that are thrown, common everyday objects, shoes, balls, the bags, pencils, pens. If you avoid injury from these, and then fights, children shouldn't get into fights. So and then also people should avoid hitting children, because that happens a lot, and that can lead to injury, can lead to glaucoma. So if you avoid this, and then we hope to avoid glaucoma from injury. Also, avoid misuse and abuse of steroids. So steroids are very good for things like allergies. And so when people get prescribed steroids and they use it for the allergies well controlled, they need to go back to the doctor to get confirmation on how long they need to use it for. Don't form the habit of using it for longer than you are given, or for using it more frequently than you're asked to, or indeed going to the pharmacy yourself to now subsequently obtain this drug whenever you feel you need to use it. So judicious use of steroids should avoid secondary glaucomas from steroids. Now, let's round up by talking about the take-home message. What's the take-home message, regarding childhood glaucomas? First, know that glaucoma can occur in childhood, come to that realization, and that the likelihood of this is higher when you have consanguineous marriages, that's marriages within the same family, and the telltale features in the newborn age up to the age of 3 years, thereafter, there are no obvious symptoms until damage to vision is significant in children older than 3 years. Any large, hazy, watery eye in an infant and toddler should be checked out at an ophthalmologist immediately, no delay. Also, know that surgery gives very good results and treatment and follow-up is for life. So you have to keep going back to check to be sure this pressure isn't coming back. So something can be done if it is. You have to avoid eye injury and drug abuse and misuse, as I said before. This is important. And you have to know that regular annual eye checks are important for everyone. Children are not an exception. So if a child will develop glaucoma, a child above the age of 3, you will be onto this diagnosis very quickly so something can be done early. So at this juncture, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much, ma'am, for your time and for educating us on glaucoma in children. If we have any questions, please type them in the comment section. Inshallah, we'll read them out. We'll do that in 5 minutes. So we had a question for Mrs. Adebumei. I hope she's still here with us. I would read out the question now.
I am.
Handling.
I'm here.
Okay. All right. Handling a child with dyslexia who is making great effort to improve, but still acts reluctant to read without anyone sitting beside him. How do you convince that child that without anyone there, he can still do it? The second question says that, how do you... Mute microphones. Then
okay, I didn't hear the second question.
Yes, please, I'll read it now. How do we convince the parents who have very high expectations from their words? Okay, how do we convince the parents who have very high expectations from their word with special need? Okay, with special need that it's a gradual thing. Then how do you convince a parent who fails to accept that their word has a special need? So 3 questions.
Okay.
You convince a child with dyslexia that he or she can, yes. Then
okay.
Parents
like I got it. Like Ms. Lola Jobi said, she said that it's not just by telling. Part of what I was also going to add was that a number of times when we're communicating with our children, it's not enough to be verbal about it only, because we do not know what their preferred learning styles are. For me personally, when you tell me, a number of times when people are talking to me, I have found that I don't always listen. So it's always better to engage all the styles so that you find that a part of the way you talk to them is part of showing, or you're writing what you're saying to them, and then you're doing the gestural motion so that you fulfill all 3 visual, audio, and kinesthetic. It's not called audio. I've forgotten the name now. Please excuse me. That happens to me every now and then. So that you have it. Now, in the event of that child, he's going to need someone to stay with him for a very long time. And what's going to happen is the person will gradually pull off. So then he's going to start reading. When he's going to start reading, the person would be there to coordinate, to sit down with him and everything. And the person will stand up halfway through. The person will stand up halfway through and return, so that when the child is starting, the person is there, and then the person goes away for a short while, like twice or thrice, and returns at the end. Then it happens more, the person pulls out more and returns, so that the person is there at the beginning and at the end. So it doesn't show to the child that that the person has pulled forward, has pulled away. So that's a trick. It's usually a trick thing that we use because it's more of a brain thing, and you can't tell the child, and the child will take it. It's a thing of confidence. It's a thing that has to do with the thoughts, and also we have to reassure them. In the case of the parents who have high expectations, we can tell them the good sides of what the child is able to do. But you see, from my experience, the reality is that the best you can do is to expose them to professionals who talk about symptoms that they themselves will be forced to look at, who talk about opportunities and who talk about likely goals, and also give share some case studies. But for those parents, Allah would help them, right? But tell them the facts that exist about it, and also create opportunities, because there's some of them that will never take what it is that the school is saying. In their mind is because that school is not good and your teachers don't know what you're doing. So they keep on shopping around from one school to the other. So there's very little that you can do at the end of the day. They need to hear from the people who are supposedly professionals in that field. And in the case of the parents who also, what was the third question, please? One was the high expectations. I think I've taken that. The second is the child with the reading. What was the third one?
Child has special needs.
Yes, the ones that are relatively in denial. You can share materials with them that talk about you. And you see, even I cannot tell you categorically that a child has I can tell you that I see these flags, right? But I cannot label what it is that the child has because I'm not authorized. I'm a behavior analyst, but I cannot diagnose a child. I can't tell you, oh, this child has autism, unless either a group of professionals or certain medical doctors have diagnosed it. I'm not able to diagnose it. As much as I come in contact with a lot of them, I can only tell you that I see this flag, I see this child does this child does this child does this. That's what I can tell you. And then if you ask me, I can tell you that, oh, these are some of the symptoms that people with autism have. But I will not tell you that this child has autism. And again, it depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to a person that I do not feel is professional, I will not even tie the two together. If you ask me at that point in time about what people with autism do, I'm not going to tell you about it because I'm not going to let you put in the things that I did not say to label the child with autism. So again, you can share developmental milestones with them. And I think that the school can also do this, where you share certain milestones that you expect for your children of certain ages to have at certain classes, so that the parents know. And by the time you're giving it to them, you're being objective. You're not being subjective. I'm not talking about your child. I'm talking about a child, and I'm talking about children. And I may be talking about a child, but it's not necessarily your child. And then it's easier for us to also break into the parents' world without putting it in their face and saying your child has a problem, your child has a problem. Because they're looking at it and it doesn't talk about any child. It has male and it has female. The child can be any of the two, So when you don't appear to be pointing an accusing finger, we tend to get the message across. But if you don't do it before that time, then they're going to continue to think, oh, it's because I redirected you, because I did not give you a gift on Teachers Appreciation Day, it's because. But if you have told them, if you have shared it before we have any ground for beef, as the case may be, then it's usually easier. So I advise the school to also put those milestone charts in place to share with parents and all. I think I can come across a few that I may be able to share. So I will look for them and then I'll share them with Mr. Olajobi as soon as I'm able to. But there's also quite a lot of them online there, so you can share with them, and that way it will even be easier. They'll see that you didn't generate it, so you are not talking to them personally. And may Allah continue to make it easy for us. But teachers, there's a need for teachers to be. Sometimes it's us teachers who have the high expectations and continue to force the children. So we teachers also need to calm down and be realistic, and also to understand that a need is a need, whether the child has a reason to have that need or not. The fact remains that it exists, and we have to help dismantle it with love. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The next question is for Dr. Alimi, and it says, is there a test to check for glaucoma before marriage? The possibility of someone's child having it before marriage, is there a test to check for it? Dr. Alimi, is she here with us, please? Okay. Okay, while we're waiting for her to respond to the question, the last question here is for Mrs. Adebomayi as well. Do we need to pay attention if a child is not writing well at a certain age? Oh, unable to unmute. Okay, ma. Okay, please unmute your microphone now.
Right. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. It seems like
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
yes, but it's
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me? Okay, please. Perhaps I think the network where I am. Go ahead with other questions. Yeah. For 10 minutes, hopefully.
okay, ma. You can also, because we'll be rounding up, the response to that question in the comment section, if you don't mind, ma. Okay, quickly to Mrs. Adebomayi now. Do we need to pay attention if a child is not writing well at a certain age when he or she should have been doing that?
Yes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We need to pay attention when a child is not writing well. However, the question is, at what age should we begin to pay attention? A lot of us, in a lot of schools and a lot of homes, we start sticking pencils in children's hands at the age of 18 months, expecting them to write. In my environment, where I have worked for over 15 years, we don't even try to encourage our children to write before their ages 4 and above. Before then, right from when the child gets into the school environment, we expose them to the crayons and to the chunky pencils. But what we want there are the pre-writing skills. We encourage them to scribble every day. They scribble with their fingers in sand. They scribble with their fingers on soft sandpaper letters and boards. They scribble holding chunky crayons and chunky pencils. They scribble and scribble and scribble. Why do we encourage scribbling? Because the scribbling helps to exercise the nerves and the muscles, not only in the fingers, but also at the wrist, which is very, very key for writing. So they begin to get a lot of those practices, and those practices that they get at the beginning helps them strengthen the nerves and the muscles of the wrist and also of the fingers, and helps them grow the, what do you call it now? The not just the energy, but also that thing, where a person, the stamina, the stamina to withhold writing and to also be present, to pay attention to what it is that's happening. But in a number of cases, our children who are still very playful, who have not started paying attention to a number of things, we begin to foist pencils on them, we begin to encourage them to write, And in encouraging them to write, you begin to lay a lot of pressure on them to a point where it becomes something that they dislike and it becomes a chore. And we now start trying to correct it. And for a child who is still very playful, a child who is still evolving, you begin to tell them that is not how. When it comes to scribbling, you scribble anyhow, right? So nobody is going to tell you, no, that's not how to scribble. It's scribbling. Enjoy yourself. Go to town. As long as you're getting the necessary exercises. So when you tell a child who is still evolving, who is not really formed, that no, you didn't get it, you're breaking down what has not been built. So that model is already meeting with a lot of challenges, even when it's not able to understand what is expected of it. So if your child is under the age of 4, unfortunately, I may not be the right person to talk to, because if we go on about it, I'm going to be going at you, trying to stop you from encouraging the child to write. But if your child is above the age of 4, then you need to help them by getting them to hold squishy things that they will eventually be closing up on. Do a lot of pre-writing skills like botany, like coloring, like mixing things, like Play-Doh, like holding Lego pieces and arranging them together, the different sizes, different textures, different feels, different shapes. So that way they're getting used to spontaneously holding writing materials, writing and doing that for a long time, so that when they have to write 1 to 10, they don't get to 2 and then they have gotten tired. So yes, we need to pay attention and put in reinforcing activities at every stop. Again, like I said, it is to go small, expand it, and to repeat. That is also buttressing what Mr. Olajobi had said, why we have to do it over and over and over again. Do it in like I said.
I can't hear Mrs. Adebumeyi anymore.
You get to a point where the child will widen it by themselves. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's what I have to share. I hope that has answered the question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. So the person that asked for the screening test for people who intend to get married, I believe you've seen the answered response that Dr. Alimi typed in. Mrs. Olajobi, the last question here is for you. How do you handle a child who is destructive, even with constant reminders? What do you do to a child who still misbehaves? Is it normal for a 4-year-old child to cry unnecessarily? How can it be handled? My daughter, who is 2, loves to play a lot, and she loves to play a lot with sockets, switches, and even having an electric shock. She still doesn't listen, even after a lot of spanking.
Okay, thank you for that question. I would say that, first of all, challenging behavior. So when you say a child is destructive, even after several corrections, that's a challenging behavior. Challenging behavior are usually a symptom that there's something wrong. There's an underlying thing that's causing that child to constantly misbehave, especially when you can't think of what could be the possible reason. You're sure there's no one who's destructive around. You're sure this child has been constantly reminded. Then it means that the child is trying to tell you something. It's like a child who has a rash or who has fever. That child is telling you there's something wrong with my physical health. So when a child has challenging behavior, it's usually a symptom of some emotional or psychological challenge. And I think that you want to look inwards and pay attention. But please don't give up. You have to keep talking about it. You have to keep reminding, have a conversation with this child. Try to look at what the triggers are. When does it usually happen? How? Is it everywhere? Is it at a certain place? Does it mean this child has a lot of energy that we can put to another use? Children like this, we want to get them involved in swimming, karate, other things that can help them to use up their energy, coordinated exercise, which is also good for the brain, like Dr. Olajobi said. Then about the child who cries unnecessarily, the honest truth is unnecessary is relative. The children are more emotional than others. There's some that are very emotional. I've talked about the fact that most times the initial reason for children to be very emotional can begin even as early as when the child is in pregnancy. That means it isn't that child's fault. So if we have a child that cries a lot, it means that this child is an emotional child. We have to help that child early to develop strategies to self-manage, but it will begin from us being able to tolerate that child's excessive crying. We need to help this child. When you tell a child who cries a lot to stop crying, stop crying, stop crying, you are teaching that child to suppress their emotions, and it can only cause more problems. You want to help this child to see things in a different light. The fact that, okay, yeah, it's okay to cry, but you can't cry all the time. What is it that you want? Communicate your needs. If you're crying, if it's a child that can talk, if you're crying and you're not saying what you want, there's no way anybody's going to know what you want. So it's better for you to actually communicate your needs. This and okay, can you see that when you spoke about it now, you got it solved? But the other time you were just crying, nobody knew to help. So we have to help this child to see that there's always a better way to get what they want. But when we make it obvious that we're irritated or we don't tolerate this child, I assure you that it can only get worse, and the child may develop self-esteem problems or other challenges as they move on. Then you also talked about the child that loves to climb and then plays with sockets and all that. So first of all, you said this child is 2 years old. Biologically, a 2-year-old is supposed to love to climb. Remember that just like a year ago, they were learning how to walk. So imagine that you and I discovered today that we can fly. Do you know that chances that we're going to start flying everywhere possible because a new skill? So for a child who is 2, they're just discovering that they can do things. They're just discovering their gross motor skills are just developing. So they're usually with a lot of energy. That's a typical 2-year-old. I don't know a 2-year-old that's calm. So if your 2-year-old likes to climb, I would say that you create opportunity. Have a climbing frame at home if you have the space, maybe in the compound. If you don't have the space at home, take them outdoor, take them to the field or to a nearby stadium or somewhere that they have the opportunity. That's why we have playgrounds in school. At home, to have opportunity for these children to use up their energy. And then you say that the child loves to play with sockets even after getting shocked. So there are 2 things. Yes, please. Yes, please. Sadeboy, I'm going to allow you to add to the crying child thing. For the child who puts the hand in the socket often, there are 2 possibilities. The first one, again, is that there's a lot of energy, and I believe you're still talking about this 2-year-old. So make the environment child-friendly. Take away things that can enjoy a child away from the environment. We can't have a 2-year-old and say, don't go there, because when there are too many don'ts, what we're doing is we're killing creativity and curiosity. So let's take away the sockets from the child's access. Let's move them up. Let's place them up or use socket covers to cover them, because that child could get hurt. And if a 2-year-old gets hurt using this kind of things, then it will be the fault of the adults around. So we have to take away the dangerous things. Now, the second thing I was going to say is that it could also mean that the child sort of struggles a bit with some awareness, which might or might not mean that the child may have some social communication challenge, because what you expect is that humans will learn. So if there's candle on the table and the child puts his hand in it one day and gets whoosh hot, and does it second, third, hopefully this child will learn, because even animals, there's a lot of experiments have been done about behavior, learning and behavior modification, and you realize that everybody is capable of learning. So if this child isn't learning, it could also mean that there's some challenges. But honestly, I would say that you take away any dangerous things from the environment of a 2-year-old child, because that child is young and wants to explore and wants to use the energy that they have. They do not, they have a lot more oxygen than you and I have, because first of all, children breathe in with their full lung capacity. Their lungs are expanding. That's why babies have what's it called now, hiccups a lot, because their lungs are constantly expanding. And by the age of like 12 months above, their oxygen capacity is a lot, so they have a lot of energy. And then the energy that you and I use to think, they don't use it. Research has shown that thinking energy is like one hour of thinking energy is like 8 hours of physical energy. These children don't think, they don't have anything they're worrying about. They don't have to worry about what am I going to eat this night or what am I going to wear. It means 100% of their energy is for activities for play. So please let us engage these children and let's continue to talk to them about what we expect and of course model it. So I think that'll be the response from me. I'll allow Mr. Debumeng to add to the issue of the crying child now. Thank you.
Okay, with the crying child, part of what can also happen is what we do to modify behavior in ABA is that when the child is like Mr. Rajobi said, there are a number of factors. When the child is crying, what do you as an adult do? Do you shout at them? Have they been encouraged to walk through the process? So what I would do if I have identified that the child has a true need and that they either have a reason to feel that, oh, we don't care and everything, is when the child begins to cry, I will hold that child close to me to help reaffirm to them that, look, I see you, I care about you and all of that. However, I will not give them what they need. Instead of giving them what they need, I will say, what do you want? And then I'll try to figure out what the child wants. And I'll say, do you want some water? If the child nods, I will say to them, say, I want water. And then if the child begins to even say, I want water, or just says water, then I will say, well done. See, now that you've told me that you want water, see, you're going to get water. And I give the child water. So what I have done is I have reinforced the child's request, appropriate request. I have shown the child that when you cry, I'm not going to give you the water. I'm going to show you that I love you, I care, but you're not going to get the water. So if you want to get the water, then you should use your word. The moment the child begins to use their words, they immediately get the water. So maybe you want to try that with them as well. And then you give them every other thing, you give them hugs, you give them attention, but you do not give them that particular thing you know they want while they're still crying. Because when they cry and they get it, what you have said to them is that your crying gets you this. So if I want another one tomorrow, then I'm also going to cry. But every child needs reassurance, whether they're crying for no reason, as we adults like to think there's always a reason, we just don't know it. So it's always better to say no seeming reason because we cannot see the reason. We can't figure it out easily. Whether they're crying for no seeming reason or they're crying for a very good reason. The bottom line is, I'm not going to be able to give you what you want if you do not use your word. So use your word. And you just say gently, use your word. As time goes on, every time you say use your word, you find that the child begins to self-redirect. And by the time you've done it for like a maximum of 6 months, you find the child doing it. Every now and then they may forget, and all you have to do is use your word. And then they'll get back on track and they'll do it on their own. And it takes away that thing. Of course, that's also in addition to every child has a different threshold and the different levels of emotion. But yes, I love you, I'm hugging you, I care, I don't want you to cry. However, you're not going to get what you want until you have used your word. And the moment you begin to use your word, you get it, and everybody is happier.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our speakers. Jazakumullah khairan. Really appreciate your time, and we appreciate you for sharing from your bank of knowledge with us. And we appreciate the participants too. Thank you very much for joining us. Without you, this would not have been a fruitful program, and I'm sure we all learned 1 or 2 things, or 5 or 10. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Till next time, inshallah. We hope to see you for the rest of our programs as we advertise them. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful week ahead. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.